Brian Searle, and we are here with Scott Bahr from Cairn Consulting Group, Greg Emmert from Camp Strategy. Super excited to be back with you for our second episode of wherever the heck this interesting journey takes us. But I think, there's lots that's happened in my world, right, with AI that we're going to talk about both in the last week and with agents and things like that. But I think where I would like to start today is with our weekly featured bird segment, of course, because that's how we're going to start every show. Lisa, do you want to share what we have from, I don't know if you guys were watching last week. We have this, what is this bird called? What's the bird called, Greg? You got to tell us.
That's a blue Quaker parakeet. So this is pet trade. This is not and typically they have 4 toes, not 2. That's interesting, but that's a pretty good rendering.
Are you trying to discriminate against come on. Like he clearly had a battle with the pancakes and lost a toe.
Yeah. lost 4 toes, 2 on each foot.
Okay. Again, I'm defending the bird here. I feel like this shouldn't be my role. Scott?
Don't body shame the bird.
Thank you.
I'm more body shaming the AI generation of the bird. I would never body shame a bird.
Well I was going to use, I actually had really good pictures from a different AI image generator. There's one called Krea, Krea, that uses a bunch of different stuff in there. It's like an all-in-one thing that's really kind of good. You could take it away now, Lisa, if you want. It's all in one. You can use different models within the same platform for the same price. And they generated a really good one, but it wouldn't it doesn't get I don't like DALL-E, the image generator that's in ChatGPT, because they tend to be too fictitious. They tend to look a little bit, I don't know, made up, cartoonish, I think on purpose, intentionally. But the benefit to DALL-E is that when you type in there, you have the natural language understanding of ChatGPT to interpret what you mean. Yeah. And so when I was typing in bird dancing, I don't know what I typed in as the prompt, right? But I put it in Krea first and then put it in a couple other places, and it was too literal. It would just show a bird standing on top of pancakes. And so the benefit of ChatGPT, I found, of DALL-E specifically, is that you can get it to do exaggerated, sarcastic, crazy things because it'll actually understand the intent behind your words better than the image generation models alone will.
Right on.
So,
and if anybody out there is watching and wondering where this is coming from, just YouTube search Quaker bacon pancakes and get.
Is there really? I didn't even actually Google it.
Yeah, it's incredibly adorable. Yeah, especially if you like birds. If you don't like birds, you might be
adorable. Do you think you're on Fireside Chats? We're on Outwired, sir. Nothing can be adorable here.
Sorry about that.
All right, let's start off this kick off this kind of segment here. I'd love to hear maybe we'll start the show every week like this. Just what happened in your last week that was interesting that you think the audience should know about? Scott, do you want to start, since Greg already talked about birds and kind of bored us?
Trying to keep. I don't know if I can compete with that. For me, it's been interesting talking to people about the upcoming season. People are hyper focused on it right now, as they should be. It's that time of year. There's a lot of uncertainty still. There's some people are a little bit optimistic. They're trying to stay fairly optimistic, I think. But if I had to sum it up in a word, I would say realism is much more prevalent in a lot of the conversations I've been having. And
you think people need optimism classes from me? You guys should change careers.
I don't think that's a good idea.
I don't think so.
No, but I think, we talked about this a bit last week too, the idea of if you're talking to your team, you want to be optimistic, but if you're developing your strategy, you need to be realistic, and I think that's happening. I would say one of the things I've been a little bit interested in knowing an answer to, and maybe no one has it, but my understanding is that attendance at a lot of the campground shows is down.
I've heard that. So I did. That's really interesting to me. So like I texted, and I don't want to interrupt you, but just
No, please.
because I don't have a lot of anecdotal evidence at all. You probably have way more than I do. But I've heard like somebody, well, I know who told me, but for the purposes and sake of this show, since they're not volunteering to be uncensored, they generally said like, yeah, attendance is down. Although I texted, I'll say Joe Dumeg, because he said that it was the same at Carvik as it always has been. But like, I don't have a second reference point for that. I feel like somebody told me some of the shows only have like, well, there's a couple. I can't. I'm trying to think of a way to word it without saying the actual thing because I don't want to insult anybody. Somebody told me one of the shows only had like 10 or 15 parks registered, but like lots of vendors.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard similar grumblings. So that to me is, to be honest with you, I don't necessarily see that as a harbinger of doom, at all. It may be it may be a harbinger of that realism creeping in. Maybe people
Okay, so hold on. Are you talking about RV shows, or are you talking about like owner shows like Carvik?
Like campground shows, yeah.
Like where they display the RVs, or
no, where the
okay,
campground.
all right. Because that would that normally be a harbinger of a downer up here though?
I don't know. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is I don't know.
All right.
The answer to that. That's kind of why I brought it up. I'm like, because I don't know. I don't know what that means, honestly. And it could be just a transition. A lot of the organizations are changing and how they're operating and stuff. And it could be that.
I mean, some of it's probably the economy, right? Like I don't think a lot of it is because they're local, right? Most of the state shows are like the Carolinas just wrapped up. Like, yes, I think it's a couple states now. So maybe you're coming from Georgia and obviously both North and South Carolina. And I can't remember if they've incorporated another state into there. Apologies, D, if I missed somebody, but they're coming more locally, right? So I think economy probably has a little bit to do with it. Also, maybe what you're talking about, you're hearing from people who have more realism now and realizing they need to spend their time perhaps there. But then the flip side is there's an argument like, we'll go attend the classes and maybe you'll learn something that can help you get through this new realism environment. But I don't know. Like, I would see RV shows being impacted more as an economic harbinger than I would campground owner shows.
And I've heard RV shows have had decent attendance. So,
okay.
So it's not great, but at least on par with the last couple of years. So that to me says, we'll kind of build on what we'll probably talk about here in a little bit. But the campground, owners, managers, attendance is, again, and who knows, maybe we just need more lively content to bring people in too. Brian just about choked. He just about choked.
Why do you got to bring this up? We're on a show where I promised to be honest, and you're going to bring up this stuff.
We almost got a spit take.
Success. I'm done. My work here is done.
I mean, like, I feel like what's in my head, and you're just trying to bait me into some of this stuff. But yeah, like, generally speaking, I mean, that's a huge problem in the industry. And anybody who's attended these shows for years knows this. And we're not calling out, to be clear, I could, but we're not interested in calling out individual shows here, individual people. But this for sure, like, I mean, it's the same people, generally speaking, every year at every state association show who speak on, yes, and again, I'm not insulting these people. They're very brilliant people. The industry is much better having them in the industry than outside of the industry. But like, you're talking about the same thing, basically. Yes, it's a new PowerPoint and you might have some new experience, but you're talking about the same thing you've been talking about for 10 years. Where like one of my, like Karis Asmadia was telling me, they were, before their first Canadian national show that they were going to have last year, they wanted to have somebody was suggesting to her, and I can't remember how far along this was. I'm not saying it was the board, but somebody made a suggestion that said, we're going to have a class on like designing postcards or something like that, or flyers, and she was like, do you know what year it is? Like, and so that's the thing. Like, but I don't know how to, I think like I'm worried it's just me. And obviously you're saying this too, right? Like sometimes I worry that it's just me because my head is so deep into AI and tech and progression and future and all that stuff that, and I know that these people still continue to bring value, but there must be other voices in our industry that can change it up.
I'm saying this as someone who speaks at these shows.
Yeah.
So I'm not. So I'm the stones being thrown are coming right back at me as well. You know, I'm out there, you know, talking about a lot of the same things I always talk about. I try to liven it up a bit, and you know, yeah, I'm pretty charming at times, but you know, it's like it wears on you after a bit. So you know,
you don't wear on me, Scott.
The whole idea anyway is. And maybe it's just kind of a rethinking of that. And I'm not saying that as a critique as well to anyone. And I don't want.
I mean, I'm saying it as a critique, like, you know, but like I'm not picking on any one person. It's really an industry wide problem. The only people that I've seen do it really, really well consistently, I think, is the Campground Owners Expo in Branson, because they have so much education from so many different people that even though the same people are there, there's still so many classes that like there's new people, period. And it's not even new people, it's just new content, right?
Right.
Like it's just something new to talk about that's different. Like is that a fair?
Oh, I think so. I think that's I think it's spot on. Anyway, I think it's a great conversation to have, just you know, in general, for people to pay attention to that, because I want to go to these things, and I want the room to be packed to the gills when I'm up there talking. Yep. And you know, and I love speaking to an engaged audience. You know, it's fun, and honestly, you know, honestly, it doesn't have to be packed as long as it's engaged. I should, you know, qualify that a little bit, because you know that's what you want. You want people who are into the content, and I feel like if you are engaged with them, that the people will show up. And yeah, maybe it's just a year of kind of people kind of finding their way again with some of these shows. I know a lot of people are doing new shows and they're revamping some of them as well. So
yeah, I mean, that's part of and I don't want to flip this into this because I know you were going somewhere and I want you to finish your thought, but I think part of it is the education. I wonder the why, because the same, like, let's use our example of like, let's just pretend there's a show that exists that may or may not really exist that I'm intentionally not mentioning, that's had the same people talk for the last 10 years. Let's just pretend that, right? But people have still been coming for the last 9. So what's different about now?
And that's where I was headed. It's like, what is different about now?
I don't know. Like, you're the data guy, man. Like, I just show up and talk on a microphone. Where's the data, Scott?
I just asked the question. I don't know. We need people to weigh in on this.
Greg, weigh in on this.
Well, I think
yeah.
Go ahead, Scott. No, go ahead.
Please, you talk.
Finish your. Well, I think I'm looking at the comments, and Mike Harrison has chimed in a little bit, and he's right on par with what I was sitting here thinking as you guys were talking.
What did he say? How are you seeing the comments and I'm not seeing the comments?
I have access to things you don't have access to.
That makes sense.
Don't worry about it.
Everybody does. Yeah.
There's there is as Mike says here, there's a bit of normalization of the separation of OHI and the state associations. I think that's a big part of it. And there's several other you know, in the last couple of years, well, you mentioned Carvick, Florida, Alabama has their own show now.
Lisa, will you click on chat in the bottom right corner? Sorry, go ahead, Greg.
What's the Campgrounds Solutions Summit West is another one. So there are a lot of really cool regional shows popping up that I think people are going to. But, you know, overarching, if anybody out there is watching and wondering which one to go to, just pick them and go. You're going to get good information.
Right? They are
all valuable. If your state has one, you've got to go to your state association show. You have to make it a point and go. Maybe it feels clicky when you first get there because I can't remember. I think Brian, you made the point that a lot of the times it's the same campground owners going. They're welcoming. I mean, they're hospitality folks, right? So
click on Mike Harrison's, Lisa. Sorry, we can bring up his comment here. I didn't realize you were seeing that. So there's what Mike said.
Yeah, and he's spot on. I'm sitting here thinking it as you two are talking that since that happened, and that's not to say anything against Ojai for doing what they did, or the states for approaching things the way they did. They're both really valid. Go to OHCE, go to your state association, go to one of the regional ones if you can. The more you go to a network, which as somebody who also speaks like Scott, I want you in my room if you can be there and be engaged. To his point, I'd love a packed room, but only if it's engaged. I'd speak to 4 people if they were engaged over 400 people staring at their phones any day of the week. Yep. But the majority of the value you get from these shows is in the hallways and at lunch.
In the networking.
And it is networking, man. If you
Who
go.
Did I read? Finish your thought, and then I'll tell you.
Well, no, I used to go as a campground owner, right? I owned a park for 26 years, and I would sit and stare at that. Okay, which I've got to be in an educational session every time there's an educational session. So I need to pick one. And even if it doesn't really apply, I should pick. No, you don't. No, you don't. If you don't see one that applies to you or that really strikes your fancy,
go to the bar.
Go. Well,
or bring the bar with you wherever you go.
It's past noon, or whatever maybe you got an earlier clock, but go in the hallway, look for people walking around, strike up conversations, sit at different tables at the keynotes and at the lunches and dinners. There's so much value in those rooms, in the people that attend the show, even if it is, a low attendance, it doesn't matter. Just pick them and go. And especially your state, you gotta go and support that. They do so much for you that I was a state association member, was the VP of public relations for Ohio until I got on the board. Even though I had been going for, I don't know how long, I had no idea some of the stuff that my association was doing for me. Yeah, they're so good. So that's my pitch right there. Just if you're listening,
I like it.
Just go. It's good for you.
I mean, I'm with you. Like prior to the pandemic in 2019 and before, like I was a fixture at every single state association show, no matter how small. Like I remember going to Virginia's campground owner show, and there was like, I don't know, 8 vendors and like 15 owners who owned like husband and wife, right? So there's like 7 parks,
right?
But they're still fun because you network and you hang out, and like, I mean, you do all kinds of things that, I don't know, just are valuable to your business.
Absolutely.
Like I was reading, and what I was going to say is like, I think it was Greg Gerber. I don't know if any of you guys remember Greg. He used to run, I can't remember what the name of his website was. It was pre-modern campground. He used to kind of sort of compete with Woodall's. He had some kind of RV focused website.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like RV travel or something like that, or
I can't remember what it was. Anyway, like he's doing a new podcast called Forward with 50 that has nothing to do with the industry, whatever else. But I came across one of his LinkedIn posts the other day, and he said either I went to a conference or he was sharing something with some guy who created something called the Unconference in Florida, which was just, and then it was all about networking. And so they had all these little like breakout sessions, but like not in rooms, like around tables near the bar and in the restaurant. And so I think that's what like I'll start one day for this industry. That sounds just really cool. It'll probably be a epic failure, and we'll make sure we promote the state associations too. But at least we'll have a good meal and some good conversations. And I don't know, that sounded really interesting to me. There's a whole program behind it, like different activities that the guy was creating, who created this conference. And it wasn't campgrounds or anything, but
one of my most memorable conference moments actually was there was a session going on, but it was just packed, and I really couldn't get in there. And so I actually hung out in the hallway and was talking to a few people. And I was just kind of standing there, hanging out. And next, some guy comes up and starts talking to me, and it turned out to be the pilot Sully, the guy who landed the plane in the Potomac.
Interesting. Okay.
I ended up talking to him for like 20 minutes. It was really cool. He was just like, anyway, that was some quality networking right there.
Absolutely. Wow. Sure.
So where were we going with this? Like, where I think
you would start off by asking what was happening.
Yeah. And then so we were talking about the whether that's a harbinger of the economic times to come. I don't know. Like, I think Mike's right. I think we're right. I think you're right. I think it's a little bit of everything. But I do think it's a necessary need, as I've been telling state associations forever, and some do it really well and some don't. But it's a need to both diversify education, as we're talking about, but also communicate what you're doing. A lot of these state associations, like you're talking about, Greg, do amazing things.
Yep.
Like really great things. They just kind of suck at telling people they're doing it.
Not here in Ohio. Shout out to Christy Smith. executive of the century, as far as I'm concerned. Christy, you deserve that. But so there's another comment you might want to throw up there, because it actually works really good as a segue, I think, into where you might want to go, Brian. Chris Rademacher, who's an all-star and a half.
You got to read this out for the podcast, Greg, for the people who are listening.
He is right on it. A lot of these shows are still running an old school way, and a lot of the owners are still very old school. You know, we're, at least here in Ohio, I see it when I go to the conference. It's sort of, you can see the torch being handed off, but it's sort of begrudgingly, right? Like, a lot of the owners are still older. There is a younger crowd. That's why I think, like, what Ojai is doing with their young professionals, that's really important. If the young folks don't get involved and sort of bring a lot of these things, into the modern era, so to speak, it's going to be hard to attract that new audience, keep growing the membership at the association level, and keep growing the conferences.
But that's tough, right? Like, that's really hard. Like, if you put yourself in the position of a Christie or an executive director, because we got to be fair to all these people too, right? I don't know what they make, but I know, generally speaking, it's not a lot of money.
Not compared to the work they do. Yeah.
Right. Not compared to the work they do, but not generally speaking compared to even a leader of an association, of a local, like, generally speaking. I know there are exceptions, and I'm not blanket statementing anything, but let's be fair of how much work they have on their plates to do all this stuff. I mean, what you're really talking about with converting an association to a modern association, as I would define it, for example, is having a huge
social let's be realistic presence. Let's not define it like how you would define it.
Well, like, I'm not going to go all the way there, right? But, like,
all right.
from a modern, like, if you're trying to attract what Chris is talking about, and just put up his comment again, Lisa, just because I want to read it out for the people who are listening on the podcast and can't see it. Chris Rademacher says, I think it revolves around the available tech and worthwhile data at our fingertips. It's always a decision to weigh cost versus value. In general, the ownership has changed from old school to new school, and a lot of the shows are still operating in an old school fashion, is what it says. I don't know why it cuts it off on the screen. It doesn't cut it off on the right for me. Sorry, Chris, for your not getting your full moment of glory on the screen. But, like, let's be honest, like, this is tough. So it's like, if you're talking about appealing to a newer audience, where is that newer audience at? They're on social media, as one example. And so, like, with all your resources and effort being directed toward advocating for campgrounds and in board meetings and talking to owners and consulting and guiding and being on the phone every day, as most of these executive directors are nonstop, you're usually a one-man show. There are certainly a couple exceptions. I think, like, Diana in California has a couple of people that work with her, and maybe Bobby in Florida, but not everybody. And so where do you find the time to create this social media content that's going to engage this type of audience? Because that's really not words in a picture. That's not saying, come join my association. That's actually being a content creator. That's creating short form videos. That's educating people. That's, and all the things that we're talking about. It's not, bless his heart, I love Jeff Kreider, but it's not sending out press releases anymore. You need to do that, like, to be clear, but that's not your number one strategy anymore. To reach the existing audience, yes, but I think that existing audience is already coming back to your show in most years. So, but it's tough. Like, and we're not even going the full extent. We're just talking about social media. Where do they find the time to do this? There's no, let alone the budget.
I don't know.
Feel free to answer.
Great question. Yeah, I don't know. There's only so many hours in the day, and to your point, they are generally one-person shows, and it's tough. It's really tough. Maybe you have some, like, automation ideas for them.
Well, but I mean, we will go over that, right? But, like, but now, like, and now it's even, is it? And I don't know what the economics of this are. So, Scott or Greg, do you know? Is this now harder on them that Ojai has pulled out? It sounds like it is. Like, they have less funding because they used to get a split, didn't they?
I don't know the answer to that.
I am unfamiliar, and I know some of it, but I'm not going to unfamiliar.
I don't want to
unfamiliar to comment. I
don't want to speculate. I can't speculate. But either way, it's tough. So all right. So let's go. Where are we at? We left off somewhere again. We keep getting distracted. I don't know what's happening here.
Well, what happened in Greg's week?
Yeah, Greg, what happened in your week?
In my week, I've actually had it's one of those weeks where everything feels like something's happening, but it's been whack-a-mole. I've been chasing stuff all over the place. But as far as, like, spotting a trend or something,
Well, yeah, anything you want to talk about, right? Did you have a good conversation? Like, obviously, don't divulge client confidentiality, but any
Yeah.
good conversations or things that you've talked about?
Yeah, really good conversation. Still seeing, I guess the one thing that I find interesting is still, despite the market, still seeing a lot of people pursuing purchases. And it's at a point where somebody who, like
Purchases
I
of
looked,
campgrounds.
yeah, purchases of campgrounds. Like I have, since I sold my park, I just kind of keep looking. I'd like to reinvest somewhere at some point, but I never see ones that really make sense. Now I'm also not out there cold calling and trying to contact owners who are maybe look like they're ready to go, have
Yeah, you're not
the
being aggressive.
10,000 yard stare, right? I'm
We
not
set
being
up an AI
aggressive,
to cold call for you.
but right, that's what I need. I need that cold calling AI. But yeah, still seeing people interested, which I think is really good. Like we just talked about, there needs to be turnover. We need to have younger audience, younger set of owners kind of coming on board and picking up that torch. And I think it also speaks to overall to the economy. For a while, people were freaked out by the interest rates. Not so much anymore. They're still not terrific, but they're not also bad if you look at them through a long enough
Historically.
lens. If
Yeah.
you look back, yeah, historically, we're not terrible right now. And I've even seen some come back at like 6.5%, which that's encouraging, because everything for a while was, oh my goodness, 7.5 to 8.5, even 9% for some folks. So
What's the
yeah,
math for
that's,
those of us who aren't math geniuses? And obviously, I can do this in my head.
oh boy, okay.
What's the difference? Like, take an average price park. What would be an average price park? 2, 4?
It
What's the
depends.
average?
Yeah, no, it's too hard to say an average price
Just
park, but
make
let's
up a
use
number.
a,
We're not gonna base it off that. Like, we're not gonna take that anywhere.
sure, we're going to
Like,
take $5 million because we can probably do math off of that.
okay, so then what
Yeah.
is if you look at the interest rate difference, what is
Yeah.
that average difference for somebody who's looking to purchase? Why?
Well, what?
Because it sounds like a small dip in percentage,
Yeah.
but it's much bigger when you look at the numbers.
Oh, yeah. Well, what? 1% of 5 million? Anybody want to bail me out here? What is that? 50,
50,000?
50 grand? Yeah. So, if you're talking about a 3% difference, $150,000, that's a big chunk of change.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. I don't want to distract from what you're talking about. Like, it is, to
That's
be
okay.
clear, right? It
Yeah.
definitely is. But
Yeah.
also, like, depending on the property that you're buying and like the efficiencies that you can bring in and all that kind of
That's
stuff,
right.
like you
Yeah.
don't want to spend it, but like you could.
And
Not like
also it's important to remember that, like you said, historically, right, where the interest rates were. And I saw this stat the other day, and I know I'm going to get it wrong, but um, oh, during the late 70s, early 80s, interest rates were really high, right? We hit the fuel embargoes in the early 80s, and there was recession. And if you had waited
like
for
12%,
interest
wasn't it?
rates, what's that?
It's like 12% or something in the 80s. I
Yeah, it
don't know.
was
I was a
crazy.
baby.
And
Oh yeah, yeah. It
if you
was
would have waited for interest rates to get below 8% before you bought your business or made your move, you would have waited until like 1997 or something, 98. It's
Mhm.
crazy. So we got spoiled by
Yeah, people
almost free
forget.
money for a really long time. And so, but nice to see that there was definitely a slowdown there for a while where people were thinking like, okay, we're going to push the brakes on this because the interest's too high. There's no time like the present. Like if you see the right deal and it cash flows, it makes sense. The valuation is right. Buy it, wait, and hopefully you get a chance to refinance down the road. But if you do your due diligence and you do the math on that right, if it still works out with that interest rate, don't just sit around and wait for a better interest rate. You might be waiting for the rest of your life. Like
How
you
much does
never
the
know.
economy come into that calculation though, right? Because we're talking about the difference of $150,000.
Hmm.
There's a lot of fucking uncertainty that we're going to talk about with Scott in a second, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm looking to come in and buy a property and say that, for whatever reason, all the reasons that you'd buy a property, um, does that come into my calculation at all? Do I think about like, what if the robots all take over in 3 years and there's nobody like, but then I guess the robots might go camping. They might need leisure.
Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting. We won't have that conversation now,
Depends
but
on who's programming him. If I'm near that robot programmer, he's probably a slacking off instead of doing his job. He's got a set of binoculars and he's identifying the birds on property by song. So
no, that would mean that. So there's a whole joke here that we could talk about like computer viruses and how only people with viruses go bird watching. But
it is a bit of it can be a bit of a sickness, but I like to think that it's my medicine. So how's that?
It's fine. We all have our medicine. Like my medicine is like geeking out on YouTube and AI,
well,
right? So
I think you have some
right
medicine
now,
in your right hand, to be honest.
yeah, well, that's true. That's medicine too. But okay, so continue. Like so we're talking about the economy. How does it impact because you
Yeah.
deal with these people, Greg, like you're a consultant, as you were saying.
Yep. And I think honestly, it's all personality type. You know, how risk averse are you? Are you an early adopter? Are you somebody who wants to wait and see how everything shakes out? Because there's always uncertainty. But do you feel it? Are you feeling that uncertainty? Some people right now, you know, maybe they're seeing all these changes that are happening at a governmental level and they think this is great. They might not feel that there's any uncertainty. They might think that we're going to be all be whistling zippity doo-dah next week. Whereas the other half of the population is freaking out and, you know, getting canned food and batteries and hiding in their basements. It's very personality driven, I think, when it comes to that.
I think that's and I want to shift this to the RV industry by starting with that's a very excellent point that I think that me for sure, I'm guilty of this, not realizing how much it sucks for people right now. I was talking to, obviously not going to say their name, but somebody earlier today who I would have guessed was very, very well off, right? Not like a millionaires, but like definitely not struggling.
Okay.
And they were talking about how like they had to put a couple $100s on a credit card every month. And I just never would have imagined that. But like that's what you're really talking about here. And we've seen the numbers of the increasing credit card debt. And we see the food prices going up and the inflation. It's been going up for years and years and years. But this is not small. And I'm like, I think I said this last week maybe, but like I hate myself for like not ever checking grocery store prices because I don't have to. But like this is a big impact on where people decide to go camping, how often they decide to go camping, how long they decide to go camping. This is not the narrative that you've heard for 12 years that it's just, well, we'll wait till gas prices went down 50 cents, so it's going to be a good year and everybody's going to. This is totally different than 2008, right?
Yes.
So, yep. Scott, instead of me speculating and running my mouth, let's talk to the data man.
Yep.
Is RVing dead? Are we all screwed? Should we run around with, I don't want to say our hair on fire. Well, that would benefit me actually if I did say that, because I have no hair set on fire. But like, should we be panicking, or is this just a normalization?
There's no need to panic. The one thing that I go back to is, regardless of the conditions, is that we work in a great sector. You know, we have a great product to sell. And we've had these conversations before about how it's a matter of selling that product. It's finding different ways to sell it. So that's first and foremost. We have a good product to sell, and that's the global outdoor experience. RVing is far from being DOA. They need to adjust. They need to obviously be more forward looking. They need to innovate, and they need to understand motivations that are changing. The motivations of the guests are changing. The economy impacts that. I mean, keep in mind that most RVers out there are not spending a ton of money on their RV. I think 2/3 of RVs are under $25,000. The point of purchase. So that person, that average RVer is out there in an RV that is on the lower end. So it's not super expensive. The financing in the industry is very friendly. And they've been doing a lot to help that. So, I'm not going to sit here and paint this huge rosy picture, because they have a lot of challenges, because they've lost a lot of traction with the group of people who would typically be like that weekender person who in the past would just like jump in their RV or hook up their RV and head out and do 2-3 days at the state park or something like that. And that person now is just taking a road trip. They're gonna stay at a glamping resort. They're gonna stay in a yurt or an Airbnb. Convenience, it's like I call it the 3 C's. I've said it before: comfort, convenience, and cost. And the cost thing is, and they each have a weight to them. And now the cost factor has a greater weight than it did in the past. So all these little things are incremental, and over time, because this kind of economic downturn has been sustained, that if groceries go up for 6 months, a year, even, that's one thing. But when you're looking at multiple years, the stacking effect, it adds up. And I think that's where we are. It's fatigue. It's a little bit of I would call it financial fatigue right now among people who are just a little bit like you know
Well, and putting money on their credit cards to survive. Like,
yeah.
you read the stuff on CNBC, inflation is down to 3%. Great. That's up 3% from the 22% that eggs have been up the last 3 years. So that's like 25% higher than, like, that's not making the consumer feel any better.
Right.
Right. Correct.
So, but that all goes into what we're going to talk about, right? Like, both the shifting dynamics, but also, like, you have to understand that this is not, in my opinion at least, and based on the data that we see and some of the conversations that we've had, Scott, that you'll get into, this is not a situation. It's not a Kevin Costner build it and they will come anymore. You actually have to put your head down and do work.
Absolutely. And
So,
that's what I'll tell to anyone who will listen, is that it's like you just have to work harder for it. I mean, even pre-COVID, it was like you didn't have to be that aggressive. I mean, like, it was, people were still camping in higher numbers. We were growing 5 to 7% a year, and people were pretty cool with that. Even the RV industry was growing at about that same rate, and that was okay because they could plan on it. And so but now you can't. You can't. You have to go out and get those people. You have to aggressively bring them in. And I'm convinced that once you get people, started, you bring them in and they start having these experiences, you'll have them. But
yeah.
you gotta get past that initial hurdle and understand that they've changed their habits. They're much more of a casual participant. They don't participate as much
Well,
as they.
deep dive into that, right? Like we have time, so let's not gloss over it like we would on fireside chats. Let's dive into the report that you did, the things that we're seeing with shipments, the reasons that, on one hand, if you're not adapting and listening and paying attention to the data, maybe you should consider panicking. But like, that's your own fault, right? Generally speaking, I think I agree with you. You should never panic. You should always put thought into, the ideal time to act is a year ago, or whatever that adage is, whatever we're talking about. But the second best time to act is
Right
tomorrow.
now. Yep.
Right. Right. So it's essentially what you're seeing in the market right now are adjustments, and this is what we pointed out in some of our recent reports, especially the most recent one, and that is when you just look at kind of sentiment and interest out there, the actual interest in RVing is declining. It's not just RVing though. In the traditional ways of camping, in tent camping, um, backpacking, all those kind of very traditional ways to camp, the expressed interest, and in many cases behavior has declined. In some cases a little bit, some cases more. But the fact of the matter is that the best case scenario is it's fairly flat. By contrast, there's this much higher interest in other forms of camping and the experiences people have. For example, we talk about the car camping thing, the interest in that's a sharp increase. And one of the reasons I pointed out in the report too was the
Lisa, we pull this up on the screen. And you can tell me where to scroll while you're talking, Scott, as the report pulled up.
the idea of the like rooftop and car camping tent sales, and the interest in those, and how those two are climbing aggressively. If you're in the industry and you see that result, you're like, oh, this has to be an opportunity, right? I mean, one would think that And it is. That's my whole point. It's like it is an opportunity. It's out there. Interest is climbing. It's an area of growth within the sector. So how do you capture that? How do you capture those people? And I know that we talk to a lot of campground people, and some campgrounds don't like people camped in their cars. I think we talked about that last week. Here it is: the interest in a rooftop tent and a car camping tent. I do this as the products because this is a way of kind of looking at how are people are they actually going to do these behaviors, and obviously it does correlate. So here's what you have. Look at this aggressive growth here. This is something to grab onto. And again, if you're a campground, if you're a supplier, if you're doing services at a campground and you know that people want to show up with a rooftop tent or whatever, figure out how you provide the services to and how you cater to those people. And when you're marketing your campground, let them know that you welcome people in these types of accommodations, because people run into all the time campgrounds who they don't let
Mm-hmm.
people, they won't let them stay in their car necessarily. But
Yep.
I think it should be clear that you're still welcome there, especially if you have a rooftop tent. And I'll leave it to an individual campground to make that decision on
Well,
who
but
they.
so how do we convince, and I don't want to distract you from your report, but how do we convince people that this is something worth chasing, right? Because it's not for everybody. Like again, if you own a super high-end luxury resort with concrete pads, like you probably still don't want somebody in the nicest rooftop tent because it's just an eyesore compared to what else you have in your park.
And they're probably not coming anyway. Like they don't want
Right,
to
and
be
they're
at that
probably
park.
not coming anyway, to be
Yeah.
fair.
Yep.
But how do you convince people that this a common thing that I see in some of these groups when I'm following it, like Mark Kep's group and other groups too, is this kind of I don't know if I wanna call it a confidence or an arrogance or a it was, started the earliest one I can remember in recent times was the Tesla thing, like, "Well, screw those people with electric cars, we don't want them at our place. Screw those people with rooftop tents and car camping, we don't want them at our place." The last one I saw in there last week was, "Screw the Canadians, if they don't wanna come down, it's more Americans at our park." Obviously, in a time where you're Kevin Costner and you build it and they come and everybody's then you can say that, but this is different. So, data is one way to convince these people, but how do we communicate to them that, like, there's really not a problem with doing this?
My comment would be: one, look at the aggressive trend. Two, this is a snapshot. These are people who, this is where they are now. This doesn't mean this is where they're going to be in a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
Many of these folks who camp, whether it's a tent or a rooftop tent or in their car, have aspirations. They have aspirations. You know what they want to do? They want to travel in RVs. They just can't do it right now. The Being in your car is much more flexible. It's much less expensive. You can stay in places you can't in an RV, and you can stay in places in your car that you can't even if you're staying in hotels too. So it's that flexibility is huge. But I think again the point there is you can see how easily sidetracked I get. But is
Well,
that
my fault.
the whole idea is that these people are worthy of your attention and your investment. And I'll bring up KOA for a minute because I've obviously worked with them for over 20 years.
Mhm.
And from the day I started working with KOA, one of the commitments they made on their campgrounds was that every franchise will have a certain number of tent sites because those are your future RVers. And even though many of the campground owners didn't like it, they didn't like tenters, they didn't want to have them there. They wanted all RV sites. They were much more profitable. The organization said, it's like, this is the future of camping. They're the people that show up in the tents. It's a lot of younger people, a lot of people who may not have the money right now, but they will in the future. It's an investment. It's a long-term investment. And that is one of the things that I feel very strongly about is the long-term investment in the industry in terms of not financially, but in bringing people on board.
And let's talk about the industry as a whole, right? Because oftentimes you hear of this upgrade path to people who own RVs, and that is true, but that's only a portion of the story. because not everybody is going to end up buying an RV, but they may end up fostering a love for the outdoors, or seeing your cabin rentals or your unique glamping places or your yurts or your deluxe tent sites or whatever those may be. And then they still are your future guests. They still are in our industry, which is exactly where you want them. So you introduce them there. But it's not all RVing that we're trying to do with this either. Some of it is, and I'm not saying ignore it by any stretch, but
absolutely. No, you're 100% right. It's like,
Yeah.
but in fact, I've recommended to campground owners, it's like, if you have the opportunity, like, show the people around, show people your cabins, show them RVs.
Yep.
It's like, show them those things. It's like, it's at a campground is the best place for people to see these things, to see how they work and see how, anyway, it's an investment. And if that many people are doing it, it's important. It's an important part of what's happening right now.
And it's an offset, right? Like, go ahead, Greg, please.
Well, no, I was going to say, I hope a bunch of my clients are watching this, because I try to make this argument all the time. And it almost seems like, Brian, you were trying to touch on it before, and I don't know how to describe it either, but sometimes it almost seems like it's like class warfare. Like, no, those damn tenors aren't coming in here. They're loud and the site's a mess and they need twice as much space as an RV.
And they obviously drink and have parties till 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah. Nobody in an RV ever does that.
Every one of them does that.
Yeah, and no one in an RV ever does that. They're always quiet and in bed by 6:30 and up at 8 a.m., cooking pancakes for the whole crowd. But I have tried to drive this point home, and and I will say this: I am one of those people. I travel I car camp, I backpack, I do all of my camping in a tent. That's all I do. I don't have an RV. I don't know that I ever will. I love tent camping and car camping for all the reasons Scott mentioned. You can get into places that you can't get an RV into. You can have different experiences. I can travel with my pets with no issues. I don't have to try to book a hotel room, because even that can be difficult sometimes with cabins. But to develop your tent sites and develop them properly, to his point, maybe you want to show them your cabins. Maybe they will buy an RV. Maybe they'll just keep coming back in that tent and be a really great long-term tent camping client. So maybe ask them what they want and build your tent sites. Take some data from your clients and actually build a decent tent site that they would want. That then also
sacrilegious.
is also a dual purpose site. So I've built it now. It's awesome for a tent, but a Class B, a pop-up, a teardrop, an A-liner, any of those things can use it and have the same great experience, because the stuff that a tent camper wants is pretty darn close. Same thing with a pop-up. You don't want to be in there all day. You want to be outside. So the outside part matters a lot more than maybe the hookups. You need very minimal hookups, but build for these people. I mean, look at if you put that graphic up again, when you're looking at something that's on an angle like this, you should be paying attention to that. So I'm really glad the conversation went there. Look at that. I mean, you should be paying attention. And on top of that, Scott, what is there's a figure that I have heard 100 times. The vast majority of camper nights nationwide are spent in tents, correct? It's 60 some percent. Now, I know a lot of that is backcountry, potentially, right? But still,
you can go after that audience. I mean, what are you missing from the backcountry except a little bit more space and bears? You could probably capture a bear and bring it to your campground, so that's at least 50% better.
Just have really poor waste management facilities, and then you're set for bears. That's all you do. They're just giant raccoons.
Little hanging like trash bags outside. Just put all your waste here.
But no, what is that number? Do you know, Scott?
I don't have the most recent, but it's just under 60% the last time that we looked.
Yeah, so think about that massive opportunity that is a lot of times missed. And okay, potentially maybe some tenters are problem guests. Well, some RVers are problem guests. You can fix that or sort of weed things out by, setting your rates properly, offering the type of amenities that attract me. Sorry to be, I keep bringing it all back to me, but I am embedded.
You've already established you don't want party people, Greg.
I'm making no noise.
I know you said you're a tenter. Have you considered growing up at some point?
No.
We've been waiting for 20 years for you to get an RV. It's throwing the whole demographics off.
Before we have the podcast every week, I have to get my air mattress out of here because I leave it inflated because it's the best way to store it. And it blocks the really pretty.
Is it really the best way to store it? I don't want to get distracted, but is that really the best way to store it?
Allegedly, yeah. You store it at least partial pressure so that it doesn't. Yeah. Anyway, But yeah, I have to. So no, I will not grow up. I'll probably be sleeping on the ground until I have to get up off of it, making unheard of when I'm getting up, and those are coming. But as of now,
continue, right? Like continue your train of thought, because what you're saying is important in that, like, you need to pay attention to what the guest wants.
yes.
And this is so stunning to me. And I'm not saying this is everybody, but the amount of people that come to us for marketing who want us to design a website that they like, 90%.
Yep.
90%.
Yep. And I go back to I go to Joe Dirt on that one. If anybody knows the movie, it's not all about you. It's about the consumer. That's
we should. I don't know. We should find a way to play. I was looking at Lisa. We should find a way to play audio. We'll pull that stuff up.
It's a
Lisa
perfect,
be like a researcher and find YouTube clips for us.
Perfect into this. He runs into a guy selling fireworks, and he's like, "I only sell these 3 fireworks because they're the ones I like." And he says, "Well, but it's not about you. It's about the consumer." That's exactly what you're talking about, right? And you have all of the best data in your campground. They're walking around on 2 legs and hanging out, and it's hard.
And if they're not in your campground, to be fair, like some of this isn't. Like what you're saying is a valid point. Start there. But also there's a bunch of people who are like the car camping, for example. They're probably not in your campground right now. But it's so weird. Like I get OCD with this microphone. Like I want it to be straight, and then when Lisa changes the camera angle, like it looks like this, and so I go like that. Anyway, I have small first world issues.
To be fair, your head's tilted a little bit. I don't know if
I am, like I'm leaned back, right? I'm leaning back in my chair. But I've had lots of trauma. My mom dropped me on my head many times when I was a child. Everything I got up, like, where do you think I came from? Like I'm clearly not normal. So anyway, like, but how do you, there's research out there that we can do this, right? And it's something as simple as doing a survey, or, putting a poll on Facebook, or asking your guests, but even something now with these AI tools, right? Where, like, for our clients, we're using some of the really, really advanced thinking AI to say, like, and Scott knows, like, Scott and I have explored it together, that it's really damn close to the actual survey results that he would get if he cold called or polled or commissioned survey results, or like, it's not dead on, but it's pretty damn close. And like, obviously, if you take the second survey from Scott a month later, his probably would be off by 5% too, depending on who he reaches on the phone and who talks to him. So, like, but we've taken these in here and we said, like, hey, based on the information that we fed you about the RV park above, tell us what are 10 types of people who would stay at this park, and make 4 of them local if that's what you want to do, right? And then tell me, like, what are their ages, and are they single, or do they have families? Do they have kids? Are they retirees? Base it on you, like AI, your independent knowledge of the ton of stuff that I fed to you, right? Not just go look at my website. And then tell me who you think objectively are the people who are going to come to my campground, and then use that to form buyer personas and do market research. Like, you can then ask the AI, once you create those buyer personas, then ask each buyer persona independently what they would like to see on my website, what they would like to see on my Google Ads, what they would like to see in my email marketing, and then do it. So, like, I mean, we've taken, like, we saw Operator last week, right? We were playing around with that. We've taken Operator and browsed, like, websites of campgrounds, just messing around with it, and said, like, just, created this crazy long prompt, right? But created a crazy long prompt and have Operator go to a campground's website and say, just browse this website and look at everything from the colors and the fonts and the schemes and the call to action buttons and all the other things, and then tell me what you think should be improved to increase the conversion rate on the page. And it will tell you. Like, nobody thinks to use Operator like this, but it's all there. Anyway, I got off on a tangent. Scott, see, that was your fault that time. I don't know how.
Good.
What were we talking about though? Personalization. So, like, but welcoming car campers, and then there's other demographic changes too that we need to talk about too, Scott. Right? It's not just car camping.
No, it's kind of the interest in different types of experiences as well, and people are putting names to them. But
is that in your report? I'm going to scroll if it is.
It is in the report.
Okay. Until I read the report every month.
It's trends and interest in outdoor experiences. I think this is pretty interesting to see. Just okay,
I got it up. You can share it, Lisa.
So here, this tells you a little bit of a story as well, where you can see very clearly that things like hiking and, sorry Greg, but bird watching are pretty flat. They're pretty flat, even though I feel like bird
So
watching.
this tells us bird watchers are not having children, is what we're learning from this, or
they're typically an old. I'm a young person on yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Scott.
So you can see there that so and I did this for comparison because I think it's pretty stark, the contrast where bird watching is pretty flat. The fact that it's not going down, Greg, I think is a plus here overall. Okay. And hiking as well is it's pretty flat, and it's actually declining a little bit over the last few years. But now look at the other two trend lines that are going up aggressively: the forest bathing and foraging.
Hold on, just clarify forest bathing for a second, because I feel like I'm not the only one who's going to be like, what do you mean taking a bath in the forest?
So I always have to explain this, and we put a definition of it in all of our work because for that very reason. I don't know who coined this term, by the way, and I will say the first time I heard it, I thought it was the same thing, where you would like maybe hike into a location and there'd be a tub set up for you. But that is not the case. Forest bathing is essentially just hanging out in the forest, kind of hanging out and, just kind of letting the forest,
bathing in the atmosphere.
Right. Just kind of taking it all in. It's really, I mean, if I had to define it closer, I would say probably a little meditational even, sit there and, just hang out and take in the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest. So that's forest bathing. There's a word for it now. We used to just call it hanging out in the woods, but
way better is forest bathing.
So now it's forest bathing, and foraging. Again, foraging is one of those things where you see a lot about it. It's in a place like where I live here in Maine. It's very, very popular.
You're talking about picking berries and stuff, right?
Yes.
This surprises me because,
but not at a farm. It's like wild.
I know, in the woods, like looking at like mushrooms and things like that. Obviously, mushrooms is a little bit more of a specialized, you don't want to die type thing. But that surprises me because you would think that the way the narrative goes about this generation, right, is that their attention spans are short. They're all stuck to their electronic devices. And much like bird watching, the patience necessary to go foraging doesn't fit that narrative, does it?
No, but you also have to consider that in the last couple of years, we've had a resurgence of baby boomers. So
why? Maybe I'm just being dumb right now and not understanding what you're like. Why have we had a resurgence in baby boomers? Or are you talking about a resurgence in baby boomers doing this activity?
A resurgence in baby boomers participating in the outdoors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
do we know why?
They're retirement. They're getting retirement age. So more time, just more free time to do these things.
Gotcha. Sorry, continue, please.
So the point of this graphic really is just to show that these two different types of experiences, and I could do this with any number of trendy experiences that are out there. You could put in wild swimming. There's what's the new one? It's like wild walking or something like that, which is barefoot walking in the forest. I don't know if I got the right term for it, but it's the same thing, like walking barefoot. So these things are all going to trend up just like this. And this is where the interest lies. These are the experiences that people want. It shows you that people are engaging differently with the outdoors. It's a different demographic. And I just saw Mike Harrison's comment too, and Jeff Kirkman also told us forest bathing comes from Japan.
That's interesting.
That's very helpful. The whole idea anyway is that like what Mike said, immersive experiences.
How do you take advantage of this at your campground, right? Like if I'm and I understand that you're cherry picking, just like you said, you could do this with any number of experiences, some of which more relate to RV campgrounds and parks, which are the majority of our viewers, I think. But how do you expand into, like, yes, you've got forested area and trees. I feel like no one's going to want to step 10 feet away from their RV between, you and the fence next to Wendy. I'm not saying every RV park is like that, right? But they're like forest bathing that I think you're talking about in this chart is not the same as standing in a forest in the middle of a busy RV park. And so it's not easy to add that, nor is it easy to add foraging. I mean, you could just spread a package of Skittles on the ground and let the kids go to town, but maybe that wouldn't make you the best endeared to their parents, perhaps. But these are harder, right? Like, aren't these like?
Well, it can be if you take it literally. What they represent is a desire for something different.
Right, and that's why I'm saying there's other things, right? I made sure to point that out first, but
right. So maybe you have to get a little creative. Maybe you do some on-site yoga, meditation, breathing, um, chanting. It's like there's I don't think you want chanting at your campground, but anyway. But there are things you can do.
There's an audience for that, to be clear. Now we're talking about expanding audiences. Let's be clear. There's an audience for everything. Is it around you? Should you market it? Probably not. But I bet you there's a group somewhere in the United States, a collective of like 500 people who are in a club together, even if they're spread out. They're like chanting fanatics that get together once a week on a Zoom call and like chant random things. Not saying they'd go camping, but I'm just saying let's not discount anybody immediately, Scott.
We do not exclude anyone.
Just like the bird with two.
So the idea is for a campground to get creative. Take what you have. Jeff again offer tours. You can do tours. Maybe bring someone on site. Honestly, a lot of campgrounds could benefit from going to places like state parks and look what they're doing there. Look what the rangers 100%. Are doing at the state park. They do tons of really cool programs there. Anything from I don't know. I used to take my son to a state park when he was really young, and he just loved them. Like the ranger would do a presentation on coyotes, or some old guy get out there with his chainsaw and carve a bear out of a log or something.
Didn't you do this at your park, Greg?
Yeah, you create some of this? Oh yeah, you guys you're wandering into my wheelhouse here. This is and I speak on this stuff anytime somebody will listen.
We're listening.
The conservation economy,
except Mike and Jeff, but we're listening.
Yeah, right. And they've probably heard it. I think Mike may have stepped in the back of the room when I was doing this, but I mean, you're talking about the conservation economy in the United States. So in 2022 was the last U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey, and it came back that now, granted, this is large, right? So this is like hunting, fishing, wildlife watching, which would include like birding, bird nerds like me. Would include foragers and forest bathers, contributed around 145 billion. That's a capital B. And then, that's hunting and fishing alone. Wildlife watching added around 250 billion. And I think birders, I'm looking through because you guys started talking, I went back. Birders alone, 96 million Americans engaged in birding. 96 million. That's more than golfers, and they contributed 107.6 billion dollars to the economy. So
worldwide or the U.S.?
This is just the U.S.
So what's defined as birding? So, like, to be clear, I know I make fun of bird watchers. I'm not really serious.
Yeah.
I think birds are amazing creatures. I just don't happen to have the patience to sit there and wait for one.
Sure.
But define what is birding, because that's a big number.
It's bird watching and birding are kind of the same thing. A bird watcher is not maybe as serious or nerdy about it as a birder. A bird watcher might put some feeders in the yard and watch out the window, might enjoy seeing birds if they're out and about. A birder is going to be focused on like me. I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and I've got my day is gonna be around birding. I'm gonna go up to the big lake. I'm gonna look for waterfowl on Lake Erie for a while, and then I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna look for birds at this spot. Maybe I heard of a report over here, so I'm gonna go look for that bird. So just like more engaged, different level of nerdiness. And I use that term. If anybody out there identifies as a nerd, you're my people. That's a very positive term, at least the way I
can see
use
myself trying to go hunt and spot robots one day.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah, but we all have our thing, right? So that's fine.
Yeah,
There's nothing wrong with
but
it.
I absolutely built my started to shift our offerings towards conservation themed things. Some consumptive, and now when I say consumptive, I mean like hunting and fishing. So those people are consumptive. I shoot it or I catch it, I eat it. Non-consumptive, birding, wildflower watching, tree identification. I would do these walks with my guests, partially because I'm selfish. I was there a really long time. I had like 18 and 20-hour days sometimes, right? So if I'm going to do something at work, I'm going to do something I enjoy too. But also partially because I understood this, and I understood exactly what Mike said earlier. These people are looking for authentic, connective experiences. Let me tell you something. You can put somebody on a jumping pillow all you want, but if I take them out and we turn stones over in the creek, I was fortunate enough to have a creek. I know not everybody has a creek. And you find a damselfly larva or a stonefly, and you show them how they live in the bottom of the stream, and you talk about their life cycle. They don't get that at every park they go to. In fact, they probably don't get that at any park they go to. Now you've made yourself unique. You've connected them not just to you and to the critter, but to the place. The place is your park. You just
I remember
stamped
where I saw this, and it was here.
you just stamped a repeat customer. Done. They are yours to lose at that point because they are at stargazing. Absolutely, Jeff. We did that too. I bought a telescope just for it. And then eventually got a gentleman who was into astronomy to come out, and I paid him in, I might have said this on the show before, I paid him in Mountain Dew because he was up late. So he was like, I just want a 6-pack of Mountain Dew and gas money, and I'm happy to do this. That's perfect.
I think my AI just posted about this on my LinkedIn. About like creating I think the experience was something about like creating a package of like just a kit where you could go out and stargaze at your campground, like super easy, like a blanket and a binoculars or something
Yep.
like that. Like that's a really
It is. Why not? We had backpacks, little activity packs that a guest could come down and just take, and they had a lot of stuff in it, but it was all inexpensive. Maybe a little catch net for butterflies and a little bug hut that you could put the bugs in that you caught and take a look at them, or seine to go down in the stream or the pond and catch frogs and tadpoles. That's the kind of stuff that people look for. They really want. And as the RV industry continues to build these parks that look like little cities and don't have a lot of trees left, it leaves people wanting these types of things. And Scott's research shows that this is exactly what people want. And not a lot of folks are leaning their parks this way. And
just
you
to be
don't have to.
contrarian. Are you saying that because of the way that we're overbuilding perhaps luxury or the cities as you define them, that we're causing people to not want that, or is it just happening anyway?
No, people want it. It's a part of who we are. My
Right,
guests.
but you just said because we're building this, that it's causing that, and so I'm trying to figure out if it's more like, is it a consequence of our actions, or would it just be happening anyway? They all have wanted it, but it sounds like you're saying they're getting back into it now
I
more
think
than.
yeah, I think it's more, I don't know that it's maybe I worded that wrong. I wouldn't say that the parks being built like small cities are the cause of it,
Okay.
but people have fewer and fewer places to go and experience it. And by all means, you can have a park built like a city and you can still lean into this. You don't have to, plant
Yeah.
100 acres of a prairie, or you don't have to have 50 acres of woods to take people into.
Well, like Jeff
You can,
said, offer tours.
yeah, you can
Partner with
offer
local businesses.
tours. Stargazing requires nothing but a view of the sky. You
Well, it
can plant
depends on where
little
you're at, right?
pollinator, shift your plantings to native and put little pollinator garden signs up, and then teach people about how great pollinators are because they put 2 out of every 3 bites of food on your plate. I don't know about you. I like to eat. I've come to enjoy it as a daily thing. So pollinators are important. Like I should stop because I can go on about this forever, but it's a
But it's
really,
interesting.
really important thing. I think people need to look at it, lean into it, and it goes hand in hand with the car camping, the tent camping. The conservation economy is massive, and it's not tapped enough.
How do we tap it then, Scott? I mean, obviously there's marketing, right? But what are the low-hanging fruits for a park owner who's listening to this? Because, like, yes, we all agree with all the things well, I don't know if we all agree, but I agree with you that pollinators are important, all those kinds of things. But some of those things require more work than others at a park where you're already perhaps short-staffed, where you already have a lot of deferred maintenance, where you already have a lot of things on your plate every single day, and you don't necessarily have the time, even though you may want to just using the example that we're currently talking about, add a pollinator garden.
I think that, the biggest thing people can do is just look at your community. What's around you?
Because that requires no lift on you, just other than, yeah.
I could guarantee you if I wanted to hold an event, I don't have a campground, but if I did, I guarantee you I could post on social media pretty much any topic, the ones Greg was talking about, and I would have people jumping out of the trees to do it. They would love to do it. There's those people are out there. Every community has it, and it's a great way to build relationships with people within the community who provide these things. They want to do it. I mean, it's around your campground are resources, and you may not even know about them. You just have to ask. Just go out there and do the look.
Well, don't even do the look anymore. We're on Outwired. Go to AI. Like, you can go to ChatGPT 4.0, and type in a prompt. Like, let's do this. Let's do this real quick, right? Let's do an exercise and see if I'm correct. So we'll share my screen here. We'll go to, and then we'll get back to this because I want to finish this conversation, especially about RVing. We haven't actually gotten to that discussion yet about how it's, I know we talked about it a little bit, but I want to talk about briefly where you got the 17% number from, just to put context around that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you come to ChatGPT here, and like, again, we should talk. No, I'm not logged in, so hold on. Finish your thought, Scott, and I'll log in, and then I'll show this. Go ahead back. What were you saying, Scott? Sorry. Partnering with local businesses.
Yeah, that was really the point was just look for those, those opportunities. Again, around most campgrounds, you're going to be in an area that has people. The universities and schools are also
partner.
Yeah, there's here around here too. There's authors. I know a friend of mine. Her husband wrote a book on birding. By the way.
Right on. I need to meet them.
You probably should.
How do you know it's a good book?
Well, that's why I have to meet them.
Well, I mean, you should check if it's a good book before you decide to meet them. I'm just saying. Anyway.
No, Scott's absolutely right, though. Partners, right? Your Division of Wildlife, your soil and conservation districts, local universities, local park systems, astronomy clubs, archaeology clubs. I used to do a whole thing around the people that lived on the land before we got there, and I shared artifacts and let the kids dig it. We set up an archaeological dig, and we'd grit it off with string and let the kids dig up artifacts that I would buy on eBay for 10 cents a piece. All of this stuff, people, they're all genuine connective experiences. All of that stuff is available to you, to Scott's point, if you just partner.
Right. And so find it easier. So let's go back to this now. I'm logged in here. I'm going to go back here. We'll say, I am a campground owner in what city? Pick one, Greg.
Let's say Akron, Ohio.
All right, Akron, Ohio. And I want to provide unique and uncommon experiences to my guests to enhance the appeal of staying with me. To do so, I want to partner with local area businesses and vendors and people to do this. List 20 things within 10 miles of Akron, Ohio, as ideas I could do. Looking for really unique experiences. And I'll go out and search the web. And here we go. So we have historical estate tours, collaborate with Staying Here at Holland Gardens. We have wildlife encounters, partner with the Akron Zoo. So maybe, is that a little bit of a stretch? That's a little bit big. Like, you could do it, but.
No, they have outreach programs where they'll bring live animals to your place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Canal boat rides, work with a Cascade Locks Park Association, obviously niche to Akron. Soapbox derby experience is specific to Akron, I think. Yep. Art workshops, craft brewery tours, vintage shopping excursions, historical walking tours, botanical garden visits. I'm just reading this out for the podcast people. Live music events, culinary classes, outdoor yoga sessions. Bring this a little bit bigger. Bird watching tours. There we go. Bird watching, not birding tours or birder tours. I just
you got to
want
start somewhere.
Historical reenactments, photography workshops, farmers market visits, kayaking adventures, evening bonfire stories, and astronomy nights and local theater. Like, and so like make it more personal, intimate experiences that are truly one of a kind, right? Because those are good suggestions, certainly, but private Akron underground tour. Partner with a local historian to take guests on a private after-dark exploration of Akron's hidden tunnels. Does Akron have hidden tunnels? I was born there. Does it?
I'm not if they do, they're really well hidden because I live here and I don't know of them. So that would make sense if they're hidden. Yeah.
Moonlight paddle.
No one knows.
What?
They're so hidden, no one knows about them.
That's right.
Well, then they definitely need a tour. These are good. I like this. So moonlight paddle and fireside whiskey tasting. Offer a guided nighttime kayak trips on the river, ending with a cozy fireside whiskey tasting led by a local distiller, featuring spirits crafted in the region. Again, that's like you're talking about with the uncarving the rocks and learning about the species, having those special expertise in there. Because you remember all the campgrounds and there are who have the wine tastings. Like some of them have wine tastings, but they just do the wine tastings from the owner. What if they did the wine tastings from the winery?
Yes.
And you get all the grapes and the nuances and the flavors and the acidity and the right.
Yep.
It's totally different.
You've ratcheted it way up. Yep.
Secret supper in the woods. Curate an exclusive chef-prepared 5-course meal. Interesting. Campfire storytelling with a local legend. All those people who played high school football who have done nothing since would love to come out to your campground and tell about the glory days.
All the Al Bundys.
Yeah. Private glass blowing experience. Twilight foraging and wild cooking with an herbalist.
There you go.
Foraging. Look at that.
Yeah. A local forager can guide guests through nearby trails, identifying edible plants and mushrooms, followed by an intimate cooking demonstration over an open fire using the foraged finds. Overnight hammock camping and guided star tour. Private candlelit cave meditation. That's interesting.
Whoa. Yeah.
Hidden speakeasy experience. Personal poetry and wine night. Hire a local poet or songwriter to craft personalized poems or songs for guests based on a brief conversation. That's interesting. You can do that with AI.
With AI, absolutely.
Again, to be clear, it's way better. And I'm saying this is the AI guy. This is way better with a local poet or songwriter.
Yeah.
Private brewery session, design your own beer. That's interesting. Paranormal investigation at an abandoned site. That's cool. I would sign up for that. I still remember we went to Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia once. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. It's a giant prison in the middle of the city that Al Capone used to stay at, be incarcerated at.
Yeah,
but it's really run down and shut down now, and there's a great haunted house there, one of the most scary I've ever been to. And I went in there and they told me there was a abandoned room where they used to cut the people's hair or whatever, and there was a chair, a barber chair in the center, right? And they were like, this is where they did on the ghost tours that they did the exorcisms in the prison. They were like, it's just totally fake. It's just really a barber chair. But I'm saying you can create a story. Don't make up something, right? But there's all kinds of things that you can look at from a paranormal stuff or abandoned site stuff that are nearby. Custom leatherworking or blacksmithing session. Personal acoustic concert by the campfire. Breakfast with a beekeeper. There you go. We're talking about pollinators. Partner with a local apiary for an up-close beekeeping experience where guests don a bee suit, learn about honey harvesting, and enjoy farm-to-table breakfast. Custom perfume or candle making. Private hot air balloon ride at sunrise, personal psychic reading or tarot experience. I can see that you're going to come back as a repeat visitor.
There you
campground. Underground blues and bourbon night, personalized pottery and wine evening. So that's just 20, right? But you could just sit here and say give me 20 more, give me 20 more, give me 20 more, give me 20 more. So use AI to your advantage. And then you don't have to do you should still obviously go into the towns and meet the people, because creating the personalized connection with them makes them remember you, recommend you. Nobody's saying skip human relationships, but this is a great starting point where you don't have to do all the legwork of maybe there is something here and maybe there's not.
Yeah, and it's one of the most common, and Brian, you know this because you're in the groups on Facebook too. This is one of the most common questions. What's everybody doing for activities? What's your best activity? What's your most sought after activity? What's your favorite activity? Here you go.
Well, what my favorite activity is probably not what is going to resonate with your guests, is the whole going back to the personalized experiences conversation we were having on Fireside Chats earlier. Well, I guess people may not have watched that, right? But just generally speaking, like, it has to be tailored to your guest.
It does, and that's what AI allows you to do, that rather than asking. You can ask people in those Facebook groups. People are wonderful. We just talked earlier about how great networking is. Do that. That's fine. But
like,
look
very
at what
niche,
you can do
right?
with
like
a simple query. You can really fine tune things for your park, your audience, your area, because asking, people from all over the country what works for them may not be the best approach. Might be a good starting point, but refine it. Who are your guests?
I have a club coming to stay with me who loves to chant. Full moon forest chanting ceremony. Set up an outdoor chanting circle in a clearing near your campground. Incorporate fire torches, candles, or lanterns for an enchanting nighttime ambience. Love it. Cave or echo chamber chanting. Scott, this is you. Sacred drum and chanting. Like, lots of... So anyway, like, if it'll come up with however many it's going to give me here with chanting, I'm pretty sure it will come up with whatever you can imagine at your park.
Yep. All
right, where are we? I want to touch on RVing, and then I want to go maybe to a little bit more about AI if we want to talk about that. I don't know. The stat that kind of brought this to my forefront came on our social media on Modern Campground, was where RVing was down 17%. Can you put some context around that for us?
That 17% decline, I think overall, was that, I believe that was in the retail sales, correct? Or was that interest? I apologize for not knowing.
That's okay. I didn't look either. Like, it just said down 17%.
I think the interest in RVing was down 17%, but actual registrations just came out recently. They were down 7% year over year, the registrations from 23 to 24. And that number is big enough to show. And again, I do remember now.
Is this
17% is?
I'm sorry. Is it, when you say registrations, is that year over year registrations or new registrations, like buying a new RV?
That's year over year.
Okay. No. So this is like a 7% less people either buying or renewing.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So it's bigger than I thought. Okay.
So which is a pretty big decline. In that usage. So it shows you that the market right now in RVing is a little soft. They have their work cut out for them because, again, and it dovetails with our earlier conversation with where does interest lie? Where are the motivations of people? And I do feel like the economy is probably hurts RVing more than a lot of the other sectors.
Why do you think that? And I don't disagree with you, but just playing devil's advocate here, because a lot of the narrative you hear in the industry is, well, if the economy goes bad, they'll all just go RVing because they already own their RV.
If they already own it, it's one thing, but you're still getting some people who are, in a down economy, they will sell their RV because they can't, they have to put gas in it. They can't afford the. I think we're seeing a spike in people saying that they're going to take staycations. At least one trip's could be replaced by a staycation. It's something, I don't know, it's some huge percent, like 30% or something like that. So what you're doing is you're seeing people replace some of their trips. It's not worth it to have it just sit there. And some of these people may just be letting their RV sit for the year. That does happen. And honestly, it happens more than you realize, that you have, a lot of people who will just let it sit there. They won't renew the registration just because they're not going to use it. And that, again, you want people using their RVs. Another factor that impacts RVing quite a bit is when you consider demographically the ages of the average participant in outdoor hospitality in general, which continues to get younger. One of the issues that drives some of that is obviously with the economy, you have those factors impacting whether or not someone can buy them. But they also are much more likely to live in urban areas. In an urban area, owning an RV is much more of a challenge. Now, you layer on top of that having to pay for storage of an RV, and it's like all of a sudden that just that one extra payment, for storage may be enough to prevent them from using or buying or potentially selling their
Okay,
RV.
so the takeaway I'm here, just so I'm understanding this correctly, is that not even counting the people who are not budget strapped or cash constrained to the point where they're not renewing their registration or selling it, that's a full 7% of people who are just for sure, unless they're driving their RV illegally, are no longer planning to go camping probably for this year. Is that a fair statement? Obviously,
I would
someone could
say
renew their registrations next month. It could extrapolate, but based on what we know today.
they're not planning on RVing. I'm not
And
going to say
moving in.
I'm not going to go that far and say they're not going to camp.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Did I
that
say
could
camp? I'm
also,
sorry. I meant to say RVing, but okay.
yeah, because that could also be an uptick in long-term, or what we call here seasonal camping, which typically does uptick when the economy gets tight, because I have it, I want to get some use out of it, but I don't have to tow it. I don't have to pay I still got to keep insurance on it, but insurance, if it's
Yeah,
sitting
you'd still have
compared
to
to
have it
insurance if it's
registered, wouldn't you?
traveling, you don't need to pay
Really?
for it. It's just sitting on a campsite. Yeah.
Insurance doesn't require it to be registered?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think any of my campers that were long-terming with me had them necessarily registered. They certainly didn't have plates, right? So
Yeah.
that could be an uptick in that, unless I don't know, maybe somebody will tell me in the comments that I'm wrong, that it does have to be registered just to have insurance on it. But
I mean, we could
don't
ask
think that's the
ChatGPT.
case.
Go
Well,
ahead.
you can
Finish your thought.
I think that's really interesting, Greg. Though that something I've
potentially, right?
always considered that yeah, if people are seasonal, they leave their RV there. Yeah, that could account for some of that change.
And a lot of my customers I was 45 minutes away from Cleveland and Akron. My neighbors were Amish people in soybeans. So they would come from the city to stay with us. They love that long-term camping because it also included, as Brian pointed out, storage, because the RV just stays there. It even stays there through the off season when we were closed, takes care of that storage component. So a lot of people, and hopefully owners are out there looking to potentially pivot. If they're seeing those camper nights drop on the overnight sites, don't be afraid to convert a few of them to long-termers and pick up some cash flow that way. Everything doesn't have to be an overnight or a weekend warrior type traveler who's going to tow it in, tow it out. Maybe pick up a few more monthlies, pick up a few more seasonals to keep your cash flow up if you're experiencing a downturn in those short-term camper nights. I know there are a lot of people that don't like to hear me say that, but there's nothing wrong with long-term or seasonal campers.
Do you want to have your question answered?
Yes.
Do you have to have your RV registered in certain states if you are parking it at a campground for the full season or a couple of months and it isn't on the road, assuming you need insurance, etc.? Yes, even if an RV is parked at a campground for the full season or a few months and is not being driven, it typically still needs to be registered and insured, but the exact requirements vary by state and local laws.
Okay.
Most states require RVs to be registered even if they're parked at a campground. Some states may allow you to register as a stationary vehicle, similar to a mobile home that will not be driven, but it's still, to me, that's registered still, right?
Yeah,
If
probably.
your RV is not registered, you can face fine and penalties, even if it never moves. And then there's like Florida, it says Florida and Texas, but they have requirements for full-time stationary RVs that are registration requirements.
Yeah, those states are a little bit different because they pick up so many people living down there in the wintertime, so many winter Texans and snowbirds.
But even that, it says
that
like
might
they
affect
have
it.
specific registration requirements still.
Okay. All right. So
So,
I stand corrected.
well, I mean,
Well, I'm seated, but I'm
check AI. Obviously, don't take AI at face value, but it appears like it's fairly confident in what it's saying.
okay.
So then assume that that's correct, which we have no reason to think it's not, because it uses the internet there. Then that's 7% of people who are not RVing, probably. Okay.
Yep.
I still don't think we're in anywhere close to panicking, but that's a significant chunk of people who are potentially, probably not RVing. That doesn't count the people who are now You also have the people who are taking less vacations, who are still traveling in their RV, but may not be going to the same place, staying the same number of nights, staying. And so there's a bigger chunk. I don't know what that, do we have any idea what that number is, Scott? Of people who may, like the people who are doing less RVing instead of no RVing, but still RVing some.
I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, but it is real. Though we're seeing a little bit of movement this year for people switching over to uh, changing the frequency of trips to longer trips. So we may be seeing some of that start to creep in.
So how do you prepare for this as a campground owner? Like let's say, because nobody knows what the future is going to hold, right? Like I've shared my opinions with clients and on this show that I think we're in for a multi-year economic downturn here, and some other things are coming our way. But discounting that, how how do you prepare for this, even if it's only a year? Because you've got to still, like, you can't just not have 7 to, I mean, at least 7. And again, obviously every area is different. The 7% don't all come from the same place. I understand there's lots of nuance here, right? But how do you prepare for it as an owner?
To understand that the people may be showing up um, with different kinds of accommodations.
With
Again,
car camping.
they're car camping. There's that switchover is happening a lot. You might have more tenters in general, and I think that the people who, if they were RVing and if it's a temporary thing, they might want to stay in your cabins or your yurts or your other types of structures. So I think that's how you prep for it.
So you can't just say, fuck the Canadians. They're not going to come across the border. We'll have more Americans here because you, as we just clearly demonstrated, probably will not have more Americans there.
Correct. So we need our Canadian friends.
I mean, but the same thing applies to the car camping, right? I'm just using that as an example. And the electric charging of vehicles and the whatever the flavor of the month is that people are, one person complains about it and then everybody jumps on the bandwagon, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be willing to embrace this stuff. I mean, look at, like, let's talk about, I don't know if you can hear my dog. Sorry if you can. Um, uh, let's talk about the 10-year-old RVs. Like, if it looks nice and it's 11 years old, how strict do you want to be if you potentially have 7% less people on the road?
And I think those are the tough decisions that a lot of campground owners are going to have to make, because
Yeah.
you may see more and more of those show up too as people hold on to them longer.
Don't have enough money to buy new ones, or interest rates continue to be high. We talked about they came down a little bit, but still.
Yep.
Or they buy one, a used one, and it's older because it was easier to get into. There's a lot of people out there that are retrofitting the older RVs as well. And again, as a campground owner, you have to make that decision. It's a tough one, to turn away business, because I do feel like you're going to see more and more of those on the road.
Imagine the experience of, like, so let's say I'm one of those people that you're talking about who's building a custom bus or a custom van, and they're obviously small numbers compared to the large RV industry, right? Or I'm embracing or I'm embracing car camping or something like that. Imagine that you're somebody who's coming out of COVID, doing the outdoors for the first time or camping for the first time or going to an RV park. And your first 1, 2, 6 experiences are campgrounds saying, screw you, we don't want you here. How long are they going to stay in the industry, in the private campground industry? Like they're going to like they're going to have a passion. They obviously do, right? Some will stick with it and some won't. And they may figure out the style of camping that Greg does is better suited for them in some cases. But, like, imagine that experience. How much do you think that happened coming out of COVID?
I think a lot. I do. I think a lot of people got shocked. There were a couple factors there. That's one of them. Two was being able to find sites where they wanted to find them. In the
Yeah.
overcrowding, and then not being able to operate the RV and park it in places that they, where there are sites and where there is availability, but they can't really do it. They can't really handle it, so they just avoid those places. And it was probably a shock to a lot of people, and I think that is one of the reasons we saw this changeover to it being a little bit more of a down industry right now, or the RV industry overall. I do believe that people are still going to RV.
Oh yeah, so do I. Nobody's well, somebody might be questioning that, but nobody on the show is questioning that.
Yeah, and the numbers may take a while to rebound to where they, to where they would like them to be, but it's going to happen. The parks, there's enough parks out there that have, real high quality sites, to accommodate these folks, that it's just a matter of convincing the people to do it, and
or them having enough money.
And having enough money. That economic anxiety is obviously that kind of negative cloud over, the industry right now for a lot of people. So it's going to take a little bit, and it's going to take a lot of work. People are going to have to work really hard to get past it. But
all right, let's talk about. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, can I add just one thing to that?
Of course you can. You're a co-host. You can just slap me around.
The age limit thing is typically only for long stays. So I have seen it. I have seen people online and people in forums, and I've heard stories about people experiencing this at really high-end resort parks, even if they want to stay for short term, where they get kind of shut down. But typically speaking, the age limit, the 10 years or older, that usually only comes in if you're staying long term, like monthly or seasonally. Typically, I'm not saying that people aren't doing
would be the case. Like we talk about, and we'll flip this in a second. Maybe we'll get to personalization. I don't know if we will. I have the one other thing I want to talk about premium pricing and all that stuff.
Yes, we should touch that for sure.
One would hope that, like, given all the things that are on your plate, and all the things that you have to do in the deferred maintenance and all the things we were talking about, that you also, like, maybe there's better ways you could spend your time than investigating the registration of every RV that pulls into your park.
Yeah, for sure. I did it for my long-term customers for sure, because
that makes sense to me.
Right, because it sits there. It's typically going to continue to sit there. RVs don't age well. Once you get past 10 years, they're if you get an RV last you 10 years and you're not having enough problems with it to want to bury it.
And to be fair, nobody's arguing for, like, you should let every 11-year-old RV into your park. Yes. We're saying, like, look at it and don't just say it's 11 years old, sight unseen. No,
I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that most of the time that's only an issue with longer stays. And then I think I had a second point, but it's gone. It was right back out.
That. If it comes back, just interrupt me.
It doesn't matter. My brain is Swiss cheesy. It's good. There's a lot of gaps in there. Let's go on to we should do the premium pricing thing.
I'm looking at this. Yeah. So we're going to debunk the myth that occupancy is king by exploring how premium pricing can actually boost profits. Yes, even in economic slump. So this is interesting to me, and I think it actually delves back into, I don't know if we still have Mike with us, but it delves back into the experience thing, right? The partly, but setting yourself apart and justifying a premium price. So, but somebody take this besides me.
Scott, you can go ahead and take it, because I am going to be the naysayer on this one, I think.
Oh,
so
okay.
I kind of want to hear this.
I don't know where I'm going to land yet. I want to hear the data.
I think I'm going to be a bit of a naysayer. So,
the bottom line is that your initial price point, the price point people see, is whether or not it falls above in their mind the threshold that they've set in their budget. If you're over it, they're not going to stay. There's enough other places to stay, unless you have, like, the best park on the planet. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're above their budget, there's a really good chance they're not going to stay. You're going to have to.
How far above their budget? Because $5 probably isn't a deal breaker.
Correct, but 15 to 20 probably is.
That's so fascinating to me, right? And again, that goes back to me not looking at my grocery prices. But, like, to me, $20 is not a lot. It's not a little, but it's not something that would, if I was really intent on going to a specific nice RV resort on vacation, that's not a lot. But it actually, in principle, isn't it?
It is. And when you consider that, what does that $20 represent to that guest? If they're camping, $20, you can go to the grocery store, and unless you're buying eggs, you can actually get quite a bit for that $20. So,
you could, but I understand what you're saying. Your point is valid.
It represents something to that guest, And that's in their mind, that's the trade-off. That's the decision they make at point of purchase. In their mind, they're making trade-offs in everything they do and every decision they make. They see things. They're gonna put the value of what you offer. What do you have? How good is it? What's the level of premium? And they're gonna very quickly, decide in that trade-off what they're willing to pay and what they aren't. And so if you exceed that by whatever the threshold it could be, it depends on all these other factors, but you risk losing them. So again, if you're playing the percentages, how many more people do you need to book that will make up for that lost sale?
Greg, I want to open up, here's an investment for you if you're looking to buy a park. Let's buy a park, and we'll just solely do crazy experiments there to see if they work. Like book a night stay in July, get a free carton of eggs, and see how many people convert as a result of that.
We could call it like Dr. Moreau's campground, right? We could do.
Yeah, but we could charge we'll do the thing that Scott said, right? We'll charge $20 more for the site, but we'll give them the free eggs, and then we'll see if it works.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I'm obviously I'm joking, right? But like there's all kinds of ways that you can justify, and that's why I said that the $20 price increase, and it would honestly be fascinating to see somebody do that, because I bet you would get some reservations. Maybe not for a $20 difference, right? But just like like the gas card thing was one. Like when gas prices were high a few years ago, we told a couple clients, like, give away a gas card with your reservation or something. Obviously, that's much more tangible than what we were talking about, just messing around with eggs. But it all goes back into justifying that. So if I'm a campground or an RV resort or glamping, whatever, and I want to justify a price increase, that's, all my competition in the area is, you run with our number of $20 less, okay? And that's obviously an easier lift than 50. But all my competition around me is $20 to $30 less than me. How do I convince people to come to me? If I'm similar in, let's just pretend the playing field is somewhat level, like I'm not a huge differentiator with, like, I'm not a luxury RV resort versus a whatever. Similar in amenities, similar in activities as it stands right now, like kind of level playing field. How do I do that? Consultant Craig.
You change the narrative. If you don't like what's being said, change the narrative, change the discussion, right? So you can do that almost exclusively through customer service and how you treat people when they get there. Because it typically doesn't cost you that much more. And people a lot of times think that it does. I've got to employ more people. No, you've just got to get the people that you have working to work at a different level, to use people's names, to catch them doing something good when you go around the campground, to have more touch points with the customer, to offer things like delivery of things to site. It's very basic. A lot of parks are doing it, but you can get that a lot of times just by taking your customer service to a crazy high level. Unreasonable customer service, right, is a thing. That's somebody's got a book out on that right now. That is absolutely, I did that. My park didn't look that much different or function that much different than my other competitors, and I was able to charge a premium rate above them.
I'm going to play devil's advocate with you,
yeah,
right?
Please.
Because, and I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just playing devil's advocate on purpose, intentionally.
Yeah.
Let's say that you do that, and obviously I think that's a great idea, like enhancing the customer service experience before they get there and every touch point they have.
Yeah.
And to be clear, we're not just talking about staff. We're talking about what they see on your website, making sure your website is good, your marketing materials, your branding, your communication, your expectations are set, your emails are sent, and then all the way to the staff on the phone who's answering questions for them if they're calling or chatting with them, and
they're selling properly when they answer. They're not allowing people to price shop you. They're selling properly on the phone. Yeah.
So I'm with you. All that stuff is super critical. But I don't know if you're aware, but like this whole generation is a bunch of idiots who are just lazy millennial people who, I'm just kidding. But how do I, if I'm an owner, right? How do I get my staff to go that extra mile when my staff is also struggling with their finances and has a lot of shit on their plate and is not perhaps as happy as they have been in years past? And doesn't necessarily dislike their job. Well, maybe that's my perception, right? Or whatever the narrative is from the owner. I don't have good people. I can't find good people. They don't stay.
Yeah.
How do I convince my staff to go that extra mile?
So you've got to look at a way to connect with that staff the same way you're trying to connect with your campers. You've got to show them that you're willing to pick up that customer service torch and carry it and create an entire culture. You have to curate a culture the same way you want to curate with your guests. You have to show your staff that you're going to curate that with them, that you, despite, and a lot of people don't like this when I say it, but it's, I feel like now it's pretty popular. Everybody should know this. Your staff does not work for you. You work for them. If you're not on
100%.
board with that, figure out a way to get on board with that right now. Because until you realize that you work for them, that it's your job to take care of them, to curate that environment, to give them the tools and the agency that they need to succeed, then you will constantly have trouble with your staff, with getting to that level of customer service, because you have to do that for them. And if you start there, the rest of it, I feel, falls in line for you.
All right, devil's advocate again.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm a park owner and I have not successfully built this culture. Now the economy is down and I'm looking to maybe a show called Outwired for advice from Greg Emmert, the consultant. And I just obviously, like, for years, I have not run a bad culture, but I haven't put a focus on it. So I'm questioning whether I can get my staff to buy into this. So that's not my answer. What else do I do?
You call Scott and you're like, dude, I need some data. These people are killing me. I can't find anyone. This is my way of getting Scott to bail me out at this point. But it's not easy.
I'm not saying I believe this. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, right? I know, and I'm playing around. It is not easy. Some people don't have it within them to do that. Like it comes down to personality type and emotional intelligence, and you have to, and just willingness, right? And we can accomplish anything if we have will. If you have the will to do something, damn it, you can do it. But not everybody wants to.
Well, okay. I have the will to be an NBA player. So I'm just saying there are exceptions.
Do you?
I mean, no. But
all right, there it is. All right. Have you ever shot 1,000 shots a day, every day for 8 years?
I did. I'm not tall enough is my point. Like there's a thing. There's a height thing. So
we
most
do not
of that
have limitations like that on us in this industry or any other, though. We can lead by example. We can absolutely put our team first and build that culture. But they've got to understand.
Like you should. So even if you haven't done it, you should start doing it. But let's pretend you have not done it yet, and you're staring down this barrel or lens or whatever you're looking at of a 2025 that has 7% less RVers on the road. You have not focused on your marketing for the last 6 years because you felt like you haven't needed it. You haven't talked to anybody about it. So your website is okay, but not great. You have no idea what SEO means. And so there's what, February 12th? There's like 3 months. Till it really starts.
Till
what can I do in that 3 months if I just can't build a culture or find the people?
You better start making some phone calls. You better find some experts to call.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
So who's your first expert that you call on your list? Who's the first thing that you need to tackle if you can't find somebody to train your staff?
You better get that marketing piece done right away. And then from there, you can, if you get somebody working on that for you on the outside, you can start working from the inside to make sure that everything that the guest smells, feels, touches, sees when they get there matches that marketing message you put out. That's probably number one. And then in the background, you're going to need somebody to start working to build that culture. But really, before you do anything, if you haven't identified who you are, who you serve, what you are, what your why is, go into AI, pull up a purpose paper template and start putting some real thought into that and figure out, why do you exist? And then that's your starting point for everything else. That guides the marketing, that guides the training, that guides everything else. Else. So that's probably the next.
Let's briefly talk about this, right? Because I've been known to have one or two marketing strategies before. Just one or two. I think there's some education that we could provide to people about, like, obviously I run a marketing agency, but like this is not about hiring me, or, well, maybe it is hiring Greg and Scott. But But like, this is not a pitch, right? Like, here's what you do. Here's what you need to do if you're in this situation. Number one is your like how people find you and how people find your website. So you need to make sure that the way you present your brand, and I understand you just said you need to go figure out that, Greg, and that's absolutely correct. But in the short term, if you can't create a whole branding strategy right now, like hopefully you know internally what your why is. Like it may not be the best way to reach guests, and there's a rabbit hole we could go down, right? But you need to make sure that people can have the ability to find your website when they don't know about you. The way that they're doing that is, we'll touch on organic search in a second because that involves your website. But claim your Google business profile on Google Maps, business.google.com. Go there, claim your business profile. It's free. You have to send a postcard. You have to verify it, whatever else. Get in there. Make sure you control your description, your map marker. There's photos of your business. Your phone number is correct. Your address is right. You have your services, that kind of stuff. Lots and lots of people are finding you on Google Maps. Google search is declining, which we won't talk about here. Obviously still a powerhouse that you need to pay attention to. But Google Maps is not declining. Google Maps, Apple Maps, all the iPhone users, and Bing Maps, even though that's a small piece of the search engine market, we have a lot of evidence that shows that ChatGPT is pulling from Bing Places for local listings, in part. So those three places, and then your social media accounts are going to be the doors into your website. So make sure they're not just created, but make sure they have the story that you want to tell to convince people that you have the experience that they want, and don't obviously lie to them. You then have to create the experience that you're describing, because that's a whole other mess with expectations. But do those things first. Then look at your website. Then look at, you may not need a website redesign right away. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Depends on what your website looks like. That's a case-by-case scenario. But you need to talk to the person who handles your website, and you need to figure out what they're doing for SEO. Most website design companies are not SEO companies. And the extent to which many people who are listening to this show and who I talk to have SEO done on their websites is installing the Yoast SEO plugin when the website was developed and never touching it. That technically is the definition of SEO, but that's the most basic thing you can do. And if you don't set that up correctly, you're still not in a good place. But again, go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I have a website and I'm trying to make my SEO better. I've already got, just pretend that you have a plugin installed. Because if you call your website designer, you don't have a plugin installed, you need a new website designer. And then say, what are the 5 low-hanging fruits I can do? I can ask my website designer to do for me from an SEO perspective to enhance my website and its discoverability and all the things. And it will spit out 5. And then just call your website designer and say, listen, I would like you to do these for me. I'm willing to pay you more to do them if it's not included in your regular service. Are they already done? And they're either going to say like, yes, I'll do them for you. No, I won't do them for you. Or I don't know how to do them. One of those answers results in you keeping your website designer. The other one may result in you keeping your website designer, but finding another SEO person. But so profiles, SEO, and then I think probably, I would say like social media would be my third. Regular, interesting content on social media. And what I mean by that is you must be able to obviously tell your story of your campground, but like social media is not a place where you just get on and say, bye. Hey, I have an RV site, come by. Look at my empty RV site, come stay with me. Look at my cabin rental, come stay with me. Book now, book now, book now. No one cares. And the algorithms don't care. And you're not going to get traffic from it. But if you provide value to people, which doesn't mean you can't talk about yourself. Of course you can talk about yourself. But if you provide value through sharing experiences or things that you offer or local area attractions or talking about the club that can go, or the local person who can take you on a chanting thing deep in the forest, whatever you do, you're providing value to people And then at the end, put a call to action. Want to come chanting in the forest? Make sure you go chanting in the forest and then come back to our RV park to stay for the night. But the bulk of the content should be providing value to the user. And I think if you do those three things, you're in a much better place than you were. I was going to say pretty good, but I still think there's too much on my list. But you're in a much better place than you were before. Anything else you guys would add to that list?
Not really. I think with, as we head into our 2 hours here, that what occurred to me during the conversation was that we did touch upon the whole idea of hospitality a little bit, and I think as the supplement to what you just outlined, Brian and Greg, is that this whole idea, and Yolanda's touched a little bit on it in her comments, getting the group involved, getting, using your internal people as resources, all those things, because at the end of the day, what you're providing is hospitality, and hospitality is the human factor in all of this. And if you do those things that Brian just outlined, those, at least, start, doing some of those things, some of those basic things, but also consider as part of your growth is the hospitality you provide. Learn how to extend stays. Learn how to get someone to stay that extra day. The hospitality is what will do that. Your interactions with your guests. Someone asked me the other day, and the reason I brought this up was like, how do you get someone to stay like an extra day? And I was like, ask them. Ask them to stay. Just simply ask them.
Beg them. Get down on your knees, please, sir. Lock the gates. Don't open them.
To that question will provide you with either maybe they'll stay an extra day because, one, they're like, wow, this person values me as a guest.
Mm-hmm.
The other is they may tell you something of value. They may tell you something about their stay. They may tell you something about where they're going afterwards, but they're going to tell you something about them. So the whole idea is, just a brief example I'll give is there was a restaurant in New York, I forget the name of it, a guy wrote a book about this, where he thought he had the best food, the best chefs, everything in New York City. And he consistently was, coming in like second, third, whatever, never breaking into that top tier that he wanted to. And one day he just realized someone, I forget who it was he consulted with, just told him, it's like your restaurant's not very fun. It's kind of a drag in here. So he changed front of house. The only thing he changed about what he provided was front of house. And the next year for years after, he was number one, all consistently, because his food was the same. Everything was the same except the front of house. And it was the hospitality. And that was the difference. And I just think, people need to keep that in mind as they, go through this process. There it is, Yolanda, she's preaching to us here. Is that, that's what's going to help your growth as well. And when you consider that, that 7% we talked about, going back to the original part of this, it's like, look to your current guests to help grow that and offset that amount. And I'll end my preaching there.
All right. I think that was a pretty good conversation. We didn't get to AI agents. I don't know if anybody actually tuned in for that, but well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of conversations about AI in the future. But yeah, can you imagine, you remember when Greg was worried about we wouldn't have enough to talk about?
We knew better. We knew better. He probably knew better in his heart too.
I talk too much, so I typically think that 2 hours, anybody listening to me for 2 hours, but luckily you guys are great at this, so nobody's listening to me for 2 hours. If they did, viewership would be down.
All right, well, tune in next week I want to see the air mattress next week.
All right, I'll bring it up. Yep. I'll lounge on it. I'll throw it on top of the bed back here. I'll lounge on it for the show.
All right.
Awesome. Any final thoughts, guys?
Any final thoughts?
That was my final thought. So.
Oh yeah, the way you did end pretty impactfully. Greg, do you want to go out with a whimper, or you have a final thought?
Whimper's good. I don't have any final thoughts. This was great. I really, really love the conversation this week, guys. I hope everybody listening did too. This was, I feel like a lot of useful information, a lot of fun. So looking forward to it next Wednesday.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of Outwired. We will see you next week. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but I will probably at some point post on LinkedIn about what we will talk about, and then we will not get to half of it. So tune in for the half that we might or might not talk about, and we'll see you next week. Take care, guys. Have a good night.
All right. Take care, everybody.